This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Dear friends all over the world, I have a special invitation for you. You might have heard me talk about this in the past episodes, but last summer I finally made my dream true and started Thank You Mama creative writing workshops. And they absolutely surpassed all my expectations. The energy, the magic we created were healing and empowering and just wonderful. So the next workshop is taking place on the weekend of 9th to 11th of June in Vienna. It will include a guided tour through this gorgeous imperial city, a visit to the Art History Museum, lots of creative writing, discussions, and meditations. We will write about our mothers' lives and lessons, but also about our needs and about what we can give ourselves to be the best, happiest versions of ourselves. You can find more information on my website. I will put a link in episode notes. Or please feel free to just shoot me a mail. You'll find it in episode notes as well. You can also reach to me over social media. I would be happy to help you with arrangements and ideas of what else to explore. There is a ton to see and experience in Vienna, but also Prague, Budapest, Munich, and Venice are a few hours on the train away from here. Also, I am relaunching the Thank You Mama newsletter and filling it with information and inspiration I am super excited about and would really love to share with you. You'll find a subscription link in episode notes on my website or in my Instagram link in bio. And finally, if you're enjoying the show and haven't done so yet, please give it 5 stars and a review. It's simple and quick, but it really helps the show to be discovered and to grow. Thank you so much for being here. And here's this week's beautiful conversation. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Tyler. My guest today is Scarlett Cochran. Scarlett is a former Marine, an attorney, and she is a co-creator together with her husband of One Big Happy Life, a successful YouTube channel. She built her dream life after starting off as a single teen mom living below the poverty line. And she just published 2 weeks ago her first book called It's Not About the Money, a proven path to building wealth and living the rich life you deserve. Scarlett, hello and welcome.
Hello. So excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I am very excited to have you here. And I have to tell you a secret. I received a pitch for your book from your PR people, and I immediately said, I want this lady on the show. One of the reasons, not only because you are really amazing, but also because at this stage I recorded over 200 interviews with women all over the world about the most important things they learned from their moms. But I always ask them, what was something important in your life that your mom was not able to teach you, something that you wish she taught you? The most common thing that gets mentioned is sex and my body, like being a woman in a woman's body, you know, what that means, and being introduced to the basics of our sexual lives. But the second most important thing that comes up so often is money and finances. So, thank you for teaching us about money and finances.
Oh, no, I'm so happy to. It's such an important subject. You know, it's funny. I didn't really think about it, but I too am part of, you know, the number one club, the people who didn't learn about sex and sexuality from my mom. And I never really thought about that. I know that people don't learn about money from their parents, but yeah, that's a big one too.
That's a big one. And, what's interesting is women say, I can understand that for whatever reasons, cultural reasons, generational, religious, maybe my mom was not feeling comfortable talking to me about sex and my body, but I wish she pointed me in the right direction. At least if she gave me a book to read or told me whom to ask or gave me a pamphlet, like just give me some basic information. That would be great. But we are learning.
Well, our moms can only do what they know.
Exactly.
And so for them, they largely figured it out on their own as well. So it just didn't even occur to them to have those money conversations and to teach us those lessons. But that is changing. It's changing for our children. And so it will get better generation over generation.
It will. And this is what we're here for. Scarlett, tell me about yourself. Reading about you, I'm like, I want to hear about every single part of her life, about being a Marine and being a teen mom. I saw your interview or read somewhere how you were with the Marines when you became a mom. These are big, big, big challenges in life.
Right. So I was actually born in Guyana, which is a country in South America. It's right up at the top near Venezuela. And my parents and I came here when I was 2 years old, here to the United States when I was 2 years old. We moved to New York City. And both of my parents, neither one of them had graduated from high school. So very blue collar. My dad was a mechanic and my mom did clerical work. And so when it came time for me to go to college, neither one of them had any idea how the college system worked anywhere, much less here in the United States. And so after high school one day, I was meeting up with a friend and I met this Marine Corps recruiter and he said, hey, you should join the Marine Corps. We'll give you money for college and you can see the world. And of course, 18-year-old me is like, yes, and I can move out of my parents' house. Sounds amazing. So I joined the Marine Corps and immediately got stationed in Virginia, which my family was in New York. So in the U.S., that's about like a 4.5-hour drive. And so my family was nowhere near me. I met a guy, fell in love, thought that it was going to last forever, became pregnant with my daughter, Alexis. And then 3 months into the pregnancy, he broke off our engagement. And I found myself single teen mom, active duty Marine, and also right around when the 9/11 attacks happened in the U.S. And so then we were also now at war. So it was a really challenging time in my life. I wasn't making a lot of money. I had really very little idea how to run a household because that's not really something that my mom taught me. She tried to teach me how to cook. And in her defense, I will say I resisted learning how to cook and being domestic. I resisted it so hard. And then I found myself having to maintain a household and keep another person alive all by myself.
Scarlett, tell me, but when you were with the Marines and you had just had a baby, is there maternity leave?
So thankfully, yes, I will say that is one of the gifts of having a baby in the Marine Corps because in the United States, maternity leave is not something that most people get. It's actually still a very rare thing. So yes, I got 6 weeks of maternity leave.
Ooh, but that's
and then
not
I had
much.
to go back to work. It's not much, especially given how active and physical the job is. But 6 weeks was still better than so many other working moms here in the U.S. get. So I'm very grateful for that. And also I had access to healthcare. My employer, the Marine Corps, provided my health care. So I didn't have to worry about the costs of prenatal care. That used to not be covered in the United States. It wasn't until Obamacare that prenatal care became mandatory. You used to have medical insurance that did not cover pregnant moms. Like, how crazy is that?
It's crazy, especially, coming from Europe, where we take all of this for granted. I'm still very surprised that women in the United States are just not out there on the streets demanding this. It's like, how are you not demanding this? Why are you not out there on the 100%. Street? But so what happened? How did you end up studying law?
So immediately I realized that $25,000 a year was not going to cut it. And so I knew I needed to make more money. And I also knew that I didn't really enjoy the work that I was doing in the Marine Corps or the career trajectory that I was on. I didn't really see that as being my future. And this is one of the powerful lessons that my mom instilled in me is the value of education and in particular aspiring to be a doctor or lawyer. That's the common sort of immigrant narrative here in the US. And honestly, it's a really powerful thing. Now, we often talk about it in terms of how those are the only two acceptable careers for immigrant parents, right? For a child to do.
Yeah.
And that constrains us in some ways, but I don't think we talk often enough about how powerful it is to have our parents from the very beginning, our parents who are not doctors and lawyers, parents who maybe didn't even go to college, telling us that, no, this is for you. You can have this. This is available to you. Because what that did was give me the idea of the possibility that, hey, no, I can always go be a doctor or a lawyer no matter what, because my mom told me that's what I'm supposed to do. And so I always leaned towards the doctor side of things. But because I had a baby, I didn't want to have to go through residency. So I made the decision that I would pursue nursing and with the goal of getting an advanced nurse degree. So I could be a nurse anesthetist or a nurse midwife. So I started studying nursing, and then I got to the clinicals part of things, and I realized I did not like dealing with human bodily fluids. And so I was talking to my mom about this actually, and I was trying to figure out, well, what should I do? And she said, did you ever think about becoming a lawyer? And it just clicked. And I'm like, okay, I'll go do this lawyer thing. And so that's what happened. And, obviously I'm kind of glossing over the process because I was working full time. I was going to school part time, going to school online in the evenings after working full time and putting my daughter to bed. So it wasn't easy. And I had to do online classes because, again, I had no childcare. I didn't have a support system around me. Eventually, I got out of the Marine Corps. I met a guy. We got married. Not the guy I'm married to right now because we later got divorced. But handling a household while also going to school and still continuing to work 20 to 40 hours a week before getting into law school, it was all really challenging.
What happened next?
So after graduating from law school, I ended up divorcing my first husband and I started practicing law. I became a banking and finance attorney. So doing public interest banking regulation here in the US. And that's where I learned so much of the strategies that I teach inside of my book, It's Not the Money, and inside of, the programs and everything that I do, both from my own personal experiences, but then also just the practical, tangible financial principles that really does govern how money works everywhere, not just in the US.
And what took you to your now husband and one big happy life? How did that happen?
So my now husband and I actually met at work. We met at work and we clicked. And 10 years later, here we are. But one big happy life. So Joseph and I, my current husband, we were both very early on, basically fresh out of law school when we met. And so we were both committed to growing our incomes. And so we moved all over and switched jobs to make it happen. And eventually we had a child after struggling to conceive for 5 years. And I took a job that was supposed to be a bit more laid back, a normal 40-hour week with a short commute. And it turned into this horrible travel job with horrible bosses. And it was, devastating because you have this new baby, especially conceiving after loss. And so I was miserable searching for a new job. And Joseph said to me, look, every Sunday you're crying about having to go to work. You've got to do something to take your mind off of this. You need a passion project. And I ended up making videos on YouTube. I made all sorts of videos, including job search videos because I was blogging because I knew I wanted a new job. And then it turned into One Big Happy Life, where I teach about, how to create a life that you love while also building wealth along the way. And it's been wonderful. And that is my full-time job now, working in my own company.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. I want to ask you so much. I want to ask you to if you have a little, one tip for my listeners for creating a one big happy life.
Gosh, wow. One tip is really tough, but here's what I will say. To just keep coming back to your finances and being committed to doing a little bit better and learning a little bit more every single day. Because those tiny incremental changes, they really do have a massive impact over the long run. And where we really do ourselves a disservice is where we don't pay attention to our finances, where we neglect it, where we avoid learning about money. It just takes listening to a podcast or watching a video. Those tiny things can make a huge difference in your finances over the long run.
And let's talk about the book now. It's called It's Not About the Money, but it is about the money. So if it's not about the money, what is it about?
Well, the idea is so often the way that we approach our finances is that it's about the money first. Right? So our goal is to spend the least amount possible, to save the most. So having the money and managing the money is where our focus is. But what that does is it causes us to forget that the purpose of money, the whole reason why it exists, is to help support the life that we want. And so we should not be making financial decisions purely from a dollars and cents perspective. How much is this going to cost us? We should first ask ourselves, what do we want our money to be able to provide for us? And then we can ask our money to do what we need it to do. And when we do things like that, we are able to say, hey, I want my money to be able to provide me with this kind of quality of life, this type of financial safety net, this type of lifestyle in retirement. This is how much it costs. And then we have a number that we can now say to ourselves, hey, and this is the amount of money that I need to earn to create the life that I want, versus what we typically do, which is say, this is how much I earn, so this is all I can have in my life.
Starting with a big goal, starting with a future.
Right.
Do you want to tell me more about the book before we talk about Mom?
Well, I would say just grab a copy. It's comprehensive. Like that is why I wrote it, to really be something that can really create a new financial framework and foundation for you to actually enjoy the process of managing your money. That is the goal, for you to enjoy your money, for you to spend as little time managing it as possible, right? Because it should not be taking over your life, but to ultimately put you in control.
You see, this is something I did not learn from my mom. So I need your book. I learned from my mom that if, she was an artist, and if you want to live a fulfilled life of an artist, you have to be poor. It's interesting. So much to unlearn and learn over and over again. But let's talk about your mom. Let's talk about Mom Carol. We had a very quick conversation. This was a complex relationship, let's put it that way.
It is, yes. I learned many wonderful lessons from my mom over the years, but we certainly have had a very, very complicated, challenging relationship for sure.
So we know that she's from Guyana in South America. Tell me a little bit about her life.
So my mom is the oldest girl of 9, and she had one older brother. So 7 younger brothers and sisters beneath her. And why I say oldest girl is because Guyana is very much, or at least back then, was very much about traditional gender roles. So as the eldest girl, so much of the childcare and the housework fell to her, especially because her mother was a single mother. And
with 9 children.
With 9 children. And also, my mother was mixed race, so her both Indian and Black, because Guyana has a large Indian population, as in from India. And so I know that really impacted her and her feeling of belongingness and feeling like she didn't really fit in in her dad's household who was Indian or in her mom's household who was largely Black, the family there. And also, she was pulled out of school when she was, I think, probably around like early teens to care for her brothers and sisters. So that's why she was never able to finish high school, even though she was top of her class, because again, she's the girl. The domestic responsibilities fell to her. So I know that she had a really challenging life, even to the point where she married a man. Her first husband was not very good to her at all. And that first relationship, I know that still caused her a lot of pain before she met and married my father, and they came here to the US. So I know that she had a very challenging life and a lot to overcome to create the life that she ultimately created.
How was the move to the States for her?
So luckily, Guyana, they speak English because it was a British colony. So luckily, she didn't have the direct language barrier, but she does have an accent. So Guyana has like a Caribbean kind of accent. And so there is still a bit of a disconnect in people being able to, in English speakers, being able to fully understand exactly what you're saying. Also because there's a difference a bit in dialogue and what we call things. So that was definitely something that she had to learn how to do to minimize the impact of her accent on her English, and also to use the more American style words for things. But it was also really challenging because she was here alone. So she came over to the United States first, and she had to stay here long enough to get her permanent residency to bring over me, my dad, and my stepbrother. So she came here. She was pregnant with me. She came back to Guyana and had me in Guyana versus having me in the United States because she had no support system. And so then she stayed in the United States. She had to go back before, because, you know, there's like a residency requirement, so you can't stay gone but for so long. And so I stayed behind with my dad and my stepbrother. And so I remember her telling a story about when my dad and I and my brother finally came over, that I didn't know who she was. And that was really devastating to her. Because
how old were you?
I was 2.
Oh, yeah, you said you were 2.
I guess my mom was 29 at the time, and I was her first and only biological child.
These are really, really, really big challenges in life. What happened next, and how is she doing now?
So she is doing well now. I will, like, just being fully candid, we actually don't speak. This is where the complicated part of the relationship comes in. But she's doing well. She's retired. I will say one of the lessons that I wanted to share that I learned from her is that you could always continue to reinvent yourself, and especially in your career, so that you can make more money. And I watched my mom go from being a clerical worker to being a real estate agent to working for New York City as a 911 operator and working her way up the ranks to become a supervisor. So she always set that example for me of what's possible if you just put your mind to making more money and creating the kind of lifestyle that you want for yourself. So she retired from her job at the New York City Police Department a few years ago. So she's just enjoying retirement life.
Do you have more lessons you learned from her?
I learned the importance of education, which I already talked about. She always instilled this in me from a very young age. And I will say, so my stepbrother, my dad had him when he was very young. I think my dad was around 16 or so when he had my brother, Quayson, who is 7 years older than me. And so my mom, when we came here to the US, my mom would sit down with him every single evening to teach him how to write, how to read, how to do math. And because he didn't know enough to place on grade here in the US. So I learned at the same time. So I learned how to read and write and do math from 2 and 3 and 4 years old. And that head start really helped me out in my education, even to when I was in college, because learning came so natural to me that I was able to pick things up quickly. I could remember things easily. I was advanced in English and math and writing, so that when I was going to college even while working full time, it wasn't a huge struggle for me. So, and those are lessons that I have taken on as a parent as well, where I've always made sure to not just rely on the schools to teach my children how to read and how to do math and all of those things, but I actually make the time to supplement their learning to make sure that, so I see school as a supplement, and what I teach them at home to be their actual education. And that's a wonderful lesson to have learned. Yes, another lesson that I've learned, and this is really through observation, is the importance of having a partner that's an equal partner in all ways, equal in the financial responsibilities in the household and also in the other household responsibilities, chores, cooking, things like that. I just remember my mom was always present, right? Which is another value that I learned from her. She was always there. She was always at home with us kids. And my dad was not. And I know that that caused her a lot of resentment and frustration. And she felt a lot of powerlessness around that. And watching her go through that, I learned, one, that I valued being a present parent and that I also valued having a partner who was also going to be present and share the load, right? So that we were doing it together versus one partner always being able to go out and do whatever they feel like doing with the other one being at home, being the responsible one. And so that was a powerful lesson that I learned that ultimately led me to divorce my first husband because I kept kind of having that expectation of him. And after the course of 9 years, I realized, look, it's not going to get any better. And I want something different. And that's exactly what I have now.
Beautiful. Do you have more?
And the last lesson that I think I'll share is because my mother and I have had such a complicated, often adversarial, painful relationship, it has helped me commit even more to not having the same sort of relationship with my children, right? I see the things that, as much grace as I have for her doing the best she can with what she has, I knew that I wanted to be a different kind of parent and create a different kind of relationship with my children. And that's not to say that my children and I don't bump heads and argue and all of those things, and that there are not tears, there are, and that I don't make mistakes, because I do. But I am proud of the fact that, like, my daughter Alexis, she turns 21 next week, and we have a wonderful relationship. We still argue. I think that's normal, right? So if anyone out there is thinking like there's something wrong with arguing with your child, no, it happens, right? Because they're their own people. Just like you argue with your spouse that you've been with for years and years. It's the same thing. But we have a wonderful relationship. I know that she trusts me. I know that she loves me and feels safe with me. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is that when I am wrong, I am just as much willing to apologize to her and make it up to her and see her as a full human versus like just an extension of me, right? I allow her to be her own person. And I don't know that I could have done this had I not had the example of wishing that I could have had that experience.
I'm so glad you mentioned this because in quite a few interviews, my guests mentioned how important and how magical it is when parents, we're always talking about mothers, but when mothers admit their faults. And I had beautiful, beautiful stories about these moments where the mom is able to say, look, I'm sorry. I know I made mistakes. I might have hurt you. Please know it wasn't on purpose. Please know that whatever I'm doing, it comes from my heart and doing the best I can. But I'm not perfect. I'm also just human. And my guests told me that in that moment, magic happens between mothers and daughters, and I dare say parents and their children. And I find it very beautiful that you just mentioned that.
Yeah, it's really important. We have to model, the same behavior we expect from our children to us. We have to be willing to give it to them, which, again, in my mom's defense, and that is not the world that she came from.
Exactly. Yeah.
She came from a very different world. And had I grown up in Guyana, maybe I would have a completely different perspective. But luckily, and thanks to my mom, I didn't grow up in Guyana. I grew up in the US.
Scarlett, do you have anything else you'd like to share?
Well, just that this has been such a wonderful conversation, and I'm so excited to be part of everyone's journey into gaining more financial control, gaining more joy from the money that they have. And this is just the beginning. Wherever you are right now, wherever you're starting out financially, this is just the beginning. And there's so much that you can do to shift your financial trajectory to create the life that you want.
Mm-hmm. But you're also with them on the journey of learning from our mothers, no matter what our relationships are like. I think that's also beautiful.
Yes.
Let me just quickly recap what we spoke about. We learned from Mom Carol about value of education. And I love it how you mentioned what a powerful message it is when you're just raised knowing that one day you can be a doctor or a lawyer, that we should not take that for granted. You spoke about always continuing to reinvent yourself in your career and professionally as a lesson you learned from her. You also spoke about what you kind of tried putting under the value of education, but I think this is such a strong lesson. It deserves to be its own lesson. I wrote on learning how to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Learning how to learn from early on and not just relying on school, but helping your children learn so much more. Importance of having a partner who is equal in every way, from financially doing chores in the household, caring for a family, and also maybe a sub lesson here, being a present parent, because you can only do that if you have a partner who supports you. And then through a difficult relationship you had with her, learning what you want, what kind of a relationship you want with your children, and how beautiful is that? That's really, really beautiful. This is all I wrote down. I think I have it. Do I have it?
Yeah, that's amazing. I especially love learning how to learn. That is important.
Yes, it is. Scarlett, thank you again, and congratulations to your book again. We'll put all the information in the episode notes so my listeners can find you and the book.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyouMama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider, that's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.